give a little love to the Walk the Talk band? They're awesome. Yeah. All right, well, guys, I am so grateful to be with you here tonight. When I told my friends and acquaintances that I was going to be doing a talk on signs and synchronicities, I generally got one of two responses. Over in this camp were my friends that went, cool, awesome, that's a great topic, I can't wait to hear it. And then over here, on this end of the spectrum, were my friends that went, wait, hold up a second. You're doing a talk about signs and synchro what? I mean, I don't even know what that means. So tonight, I think what I'm going to do to help out my friends on this end of the spectrum in this camp, I'm going to talk, before I begin, a little bit about what those words mean. So let's look at signs and synchronicities. A sign is an occurrence or an object that seems to point to something. We all see signs every day, right? You're driving down the road, you see signs. They help you know how to proceed. They help you know which way to go as you go forward. It's pretty much the same thing with signs on a deeper level. They are guideposts. They are things that help us know how to proceed forward in our lives. For a lot of people, the sign may look very mundane, but because of the way it's experienced by us personally, it can carry great significance. Now, synchronicities actually are two separate events that are causally unrelated, but because of the way they're experienced, they carry great significance and meaning. So for example, maybe you wake up one morning and on a whim, you decide to drive a different way to work. And you get to work and find out that there was a major accident on your regular route. Your decision to drive a different way and the accident were unrelated, but because of the way they were experienced, they carry great significance to you. Okay, so that's synchronicities. You may be wondering, where do I stand on this continuum, on this spectrum? Well, that's what I plan to talk to you about for the next 10 minutes or so, is my journey through my belief in signs and synchronicities. So let's start back at the very beginning. I was raised in a Baptist household, and in that household, I was taught that God was always watching us. God was everywhere. God was always there judging. It's kind of like a benevolent overlord who could strike you down with lightning at any time. So as you can imagine, I was very aware of the decisions I made and the consequences that might ensue. I mean, after all, how embarrassing would that be? You know, like, oh, sorry for that charred crater over there. It turns out God really didn't like that cuss word I just used. So I was always looking for signs that what I was doing was okay and acceptable. Well, one day in Sunday school class, I got a wonderful tool presented to me by my teacher. How many of you know the story of Gideon from the Old Testament? Okay, I'm going to give you the Reader's Digest condensed version, okay? This is the version according to me. All right, so Gideon was getting ready to go into battle. There was a lot of that in the Old Testament. And he said to God, God, I want to know if my army is going to win. So he said, here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to lay a fleece out on the threshing room floor, and in the morning, when I wake up, if the fleece is dry and the ground around it is wet, I'll know that's a sign from you that our armies are going to be victorious. So Gideon goes to sleep, he wakes up, fleece is dry, ground is wet, yay, his army's going to win, he's so excited. No, he's not excited, because Gideon was a little bit of a doubting Thomas. Another biblical reference there for you. So he said, okay, God, cool, dude, I like that, that was really neat, but this time, I'm going to ask you to do it again, but I want the fleece to be wet and the ground around it to be dry. So he went to sleep, got up the next morning, fleece was wet, ground was dry, yay, his army's going to win. Okay, I'm not sure what lesson the Sunday school teacher wanted me to take away from this, but I thought I had hit the jackpot. I finally knew what I could do. I would start asking God for signs. I mean, after all, it was all right there. The key points from that lesson were this. Number one, God could do really cool things with morning dew and lamb's wool. Number two, God would tolerate a certain amount of cheekiness from people asking for signs. And number 3, God could control the world around me to tell me what I should and shouldn't be doing. Bingo, that was it. I would lay out a fleece for God religiously. I asked for all kinds of things, major things, minor things. I even remember getting ready to go to school for the instrument try-on when you get to figure out what instrument you're going to play in band. I said, God, when I wake up in the morning, if there are clouds in the sky, I should play the oboe. If there are no clouds, I should play the clarinet. I woke up, it was a clear day, and I ended up playing clarinet. What do you know? So that was great. And it worked out well. I actually enjoyed the clarinet quite a bit. But I tell you this story because I want you to understand that at that point in my life, I really did believe that God interacted with us personally, and I believed in signs. But let's fast forward a little bit. As I got ready to go to college, I started to hang out with some more intellectual types. These were people that required hard, cold facts and evidence in order to support any belief. And I wasn't about to share with them my belief in signs. In fact, I started to doubt that belief system altogether. I started to think maybe that was just childish imaginings. And I started to think maybe God didn't interact with us on a personal level. I even started to doubt if God existed at all. So I decided at that point in my life to just cut off my spiritual self. There was a problem with that. I consider us all to be spiritual beings at heart. And when we cut off our spiritual self, it's like cutting off a body part and expecting to function in a normal way. So when I did this, I created a void inside of me that I didn't understand and that I couldn't fill. And this void became greater as time went on. You see, I graduated from college, I got married, I had kids, I became a teacher, and a lot of things in my life started to pile in on that void. Things like self-doubt, anxiety, depression. All of these things kind of rolled into the void and made it larger and greater. I started to experience a lot of pain until the void inside of me became more like a black hole. It kind of sucked all life around into it, and I didn't have a coping mechanism. I didn't have a spiritual path to help me figure out how to fill that hole, fill that void inside of me. So I looked for a coping mechanism to help ease that pain. And I found one, and it was alcohol. You see, alcohol helped numb the pain for a little while. It helped me to be able to cope with the fact that I felt empty a lot of the time. But as with many coping mechanisms, it was not very helpful, and the cure soon became the disease. As time passed, alcohol went from being my friend and my solace to my enemy and my destruction. I hit a point in 2014 where I could no longer continue to drink because that was creating pain inside of me, but I couldn't not drink because of the pain inside of me, and I knew I needed help. So on July 14th, 2014, I decided to attend my very first AA meeting. As I walked up to that building and I looked around at the people who were coming into this meeting with me, I thought, I am in the wrong place. I am not supposed to be here. I was pretty sure that this all was very, very wrong, and I was ready to turn on my heel and go back to my car when this still small voice inside of me said, you need to go in and take a seat. And I did. And I thank God that I did. Because when I got into that room and I sat down, those people that I had been judging on the way in were welcoming and loving. They were joyous. They shook my hand and hugged me. They said things to me like, we will love you until you can learn to love yourself, and keep coming back. And in that moment, I suddenly realized for the first time I was exactly where I needed to be. I understood what people meant when they said God had led them somewhere, because I had been led to this moment. in that moment, I was able to open up. I was able to be everything I was intended to be. And when I uttered the words, "Hello, my name is Margie, and I'm an alcoholic," I realized my life would change forever. You see, in opening up, I suddenly realized that I had been looking at life as though through a telescope, only seeing a small part, not really being able to see the entire picture. But in opening my heart, I suddenly became aware. I was suddenly able to see and notice small signs around me. One of the first signs that I noticed was that I needed to leave teaching. I had been a teacher for many years. I had been very successful as a teacher, and all logical signs pointed to the fact that I should just stay with teaching. And in fact, I could count on my hand the number of people that supported me in this choice to leave teaching, and I would still have fingers left over. But those voices did not matter to me. The only voice that mattered to me was the voice inside my heart, the voice that I now knew would lead me in the right direction. And so I did leave teaching, and it was the best decision for my sanity and for my sobriety. And since then, I have had 2 amazing careers where I've learned so much that I never would have been a part of or been able to learn from had I not listened to that voice. The next sign that I received actually was a sign. I dropped my son off at drum lessons like I always did, and I took my laptop to Starbucks like I always did, and I ended up at the table I hate the most, the one right by the bulletin board. Ugh, I never got that table, and I never liked that table. So I thought, fine, whatever. I just open up my laptop and I start working. And all of a sudden I thought, I should look at the bulletin board. I have this feeling I should look at the bulletin board, and I look at it. And there's posters there. It's all cluttered. You've seen the Starbucks bulletin boards. And there's one that stands out, though. It says, "Listen to your mother." And I thought, wow, that's good advice. I wish someone would tell my kids that. That would be really nice. And I go back to typing away on my computer, but I felt that voice inside me, again, kind of tugging at me. And it said, "Read a little bit more." So I read a little bit more on the poster, and it was calling for submissions of original works on motherhood. And I thought, I'm supposed to write a story on motherhood. And the voice was like, yeah, how about that? So I started typing. I didn't do my work. I just pushed that right aside, and I started typing. This story flowed out of me like water. I understood what people talk about when they say they felt inspired. I called this story Lessons from Motherhood, and it was all about the lessons that my 2 beautiful children had taught me about living life to its fullest. I finished it. I read through it one time, and I submitted it without letting anyone else look at it. I never did that. I would never do that, but I did. And I thought, well, that's it. I'm done. That's not going to go anywhere. But what do you know? I was actually honored to be a part of that show, and I met the most amazing people, and I got to be able to share in their stories as well and hear more about some amazing stories on motherhood. The last story I want to share with you actually is a story about synchronicity, and it has to do with the Walk the Talk series. Now, some of you are already going to know the end of this story if you came to the last talk, so bear with me. But you don't know the beginning of it. I'm going to share that part with you now. I was on Facebook, as I often am, way too often, and I was flipping through, and I saw this cute poster of this little dog meditating. He was so adorable. I just kept flipping, and all of a sudden that voice said, "Go back to that, look at that." So I flip back, and I'm like, yeah, it's on mindfulness. Mindfulness. Hey, wait, that's what I've been working on in my AA program. I'm trying to work on mindfulness. So I read a little bit more. As it turned out, they were calling for people to audition to present stories on mindfulness. And I thought, well, how cool is that? That's really awesome. So I reached out to Stephen Ross, and I was like, hey, I want to audition. And he said, well, too bad, because all the audition slots are filled. Maybe you can audition for the next show. I was like, okay, fine. That obviously was a false alarm. Okay, good. Half an hour later, Steve reaches back out to me and says, you must be really good at manifesting because someone just called and canceled their audition. Would you be interested in taking the slot? Are you kidding me? Yeah, I think I can take the slot. Those of you that were at the show on mindfulness know the end of this story. I got to be a part of that show as well. And again, it was a growing experience. It's like the little voice inside of me said, come on, let's go do something. Let's grow some more. The more I listen to that voice, the more that I can pay attention to it, the more I grow. So I would encourage you, if you can, open up your heart. Pay attention to that little voice inside you. I mean, he's the one who should have this microphone. You've got to listen to that voice inside of your heart. And for those of you who are living over here in this camp, that's cool. No worries. I think that's awesome. But I would encourage you to maybe think a little bit differently about signs and synchronicities. I mean, after all, signs and synchronicities don't have to come from God or a higher power. I think we live in this world around us for a reason. This world can give us signs. This world can present us with synchronicities. I mean, after all, the world acts upon us as we act upon it. Thank you.